What if I told you that in America, you can climb into a real aircraft, start the engine, take off, and under the right conditions, you don't need a traditional pilot license. No private pilot check ride. No expensive certified airplane. And for a qualifying ultralight, no conventional aircraft registration. This is possible because of FAA Part 103. But Part 103 does not mean there are no rules. Powered ultralights must remain within strict limits for weight, fuel capacity, speed, and recreational use. And although a qualifying pilot may not need a conventional license, weather, maintenance, and gravity still matter. Today, we're counting down 11 of the most fascinating ultralight aircraft in America. Some fold into trailers. One takes off from water. Another can soar without an engine. And number 1 is an actual ultralight helicopter. Let's begin. Number 11. Quicksilver MX-1 Sport. If you want to understand what ultralight flying originally felt like, the Quicksilver MX-1 Sport is a perfect place to start. This aircraft strips flight down to the essentials: aluminum tubing, fabric-covered wings, a lightweight engine, and one pilot sitting almost completely exposed beneath the structure. There are no real doors, no luxury interior, and very little separating your boots from the landscape below. That is why aircraft like the Quicksilver earned the affectionate nickname, the Flying Lawn Chair. And strangely enough, that is part of the charm. At 40 miles per hour in a car, almost nothing feels dramatic. At the same speed, with the wind hitting your body and the ground visible directly beneath your feet, 40 suddenly feels fast. You hear the engine. You feel every gust. You smell the fields below. And because almost every part of the aircraft is visible, flying becomes incredibly mechanical and direct. There is very little hiding the fact that a few tubes, fabric, and an engine are keeping you in the air. It is about as pure as powered flight gets. But not everyone wants that much wind in their face. So our next aircraft takes the ultralight concept and makes it feel much more like a normal airplane. Number 10. CGS Hawk Classic. The CGS Hawk Classic helped change what people believed an ultralight could be. Instead of looking like a powered hang glider, the Hawk looks much closer to a conventional light airplane. You get a high wing, a proper tail, traditional 3-axis controls, and a cockpit that can provide far more protection than the exposed machines of the early ultralight era. That last point matters more than you might think. Open cockpit flying sounds romantic until you try it on a cold morning, or spend 40 minutes being hit by insects, or realize that constant wind can become surprisingly tiring. The Hawk offers a much more civilized experience. Depending on configuration and weight management, the pilot can have a windshield and more substantial cockpit protection while still preserving the lightweight philosophy that makes ultralight flying possible. And if you already understand the basic controls of a conventional airplane, the Hawk feels familiar. Stick, rudder pedals, pitch, roll, yaw. It behaves much more like the aircraft most people picture when they hear the word airplane. Think of it as the difference between riding an exposed motorcycle and driving a tiny, lightweight sports car. Both are fun. One simply gives you a little more protection from the world outside. But if protection sounds good, wait until you see number 9. Because this aircraft can use something most airplanes consider an obstacle as its runway. Number 9. Aero Aventura UL. Most airplanes need land. The Aventura UL does not always care. Its boat-shaped hull allows the aircraft to operate from water, turning lakes into potential takeoff and landing areas. And that changes the experience completely. Imagine an early morning in Florida or the Midwest. The lake is almost perfectly calm. There is no tower, no line of airplanes waiting for departure, no concrete runway. You taxi away from the shoreline. Add power. The hull begins skipping across the surface. Water sprays behind you. Then suddenly, the spray disappears. You are flying. That is the magic of an amphibious ultralight. A normal airplane looks at a lake and sees nowhere to land. The Aventura sees opportunity. Its lightweight structure and amphibious design make it one of the most versatile machines on this list. And for builders, aircraft like this can also provide another kind of satisfaction. When you assemble an aircraft yourself, you learn how it works. You know where the cables run. You understand the structure. You know which bolts hold critical parts together. That knowledge can create a very different relationship with the machine. Of course, water operations bring their own challenges. Corrosion matters. Waves matter. Wind matters. Wind matters. But if your idea of freedom includes disappearing into a landscape full of lakes, the Aventura is difficult to ignore. Our next aircraft has no interest in behaving like a boat. It feels more like a motorcycle that accidentally learned to fly. Number 8. Evolution Trikes REV. The Evolution Trikes REV changes the entire way you control an aircraft. This is a weight shift trike. Instead of moving conventional ailerons with a control stick, the pilot uses a large control bar connected to a hang glider-style wing. Flying becomes physical. You are not simply commanding the aircraft. You are moving with it. The pilot sits on an exposed three-wheel chassis with the engine behind and the wing above. The wind hits you directly. You feel vibration through the frame. And control inputs require much more movement than the tiny stick corrections inside a conventional airplane. That is why trikes are so often compared with motorcycles. You don't really sit inside one. You ride it. The attraction is not luxury. It is connection. Everything feels immediate. Throttle, wind, bank angle, acceleration. Even the ground passing beneath you feels closer. Large tires and simple construction also make this type of aircraft attractive to pilots who enjoy operating from basic grass fields rather than major airports. It is aviation for people who think a normal cockpit creates too much distance between the pilot and the experience. But once the flight is over, almost every airplane faces the same annoying problem. Where do you store it? Number 7 has one of the smartest solutions. Number 7. Badland Aircraft F-Series. The Badland F-Series looks like somebody took a small bush plane and kept shrinking it until it entered the ultralight world. It has the familiar shape of a conventional airplane. High wing, traditional tail, landing gear, a defined cockpit. But its most important feature appears after the flying stops. The wings fold, and that can completely change the economics of ownership. Hangars are expensive. In some parts of America, they are also difficult to find. A small airplane may cost thousands of dollars every year simply because its wings occupy too much space. Fold those wings alongside the fuselage, and suddenly the aircraft becomes much easier to store. A trailer becomes possible. A large garage becomes possible. Transporting the airplane to a different flying site becomes much easier. And for recreational pilots, this can matter more than another 10 miles per hour of speed. The Badland also shows how modern ultralights are evolving. Designers increasingly want these machines to look and behave like traditional airplanes while still remaining incredibly light. And that forces engineers to become ruthless. Every bracket matters. Every instrument matters. Every panel adds weight. The question is always, do we really need this? That kind of engineering can produce surprisingly practical aircraft. But our next machine has a completely different mission. It doesn't want to go fast. It wants to stay in the air, even after the engine stops. Number 6. Zigolo MG12. The Zigolo MG12 begins as a powered ultralight, but the most interesting moment comes when the pilot turns the engine off. That sounds like an emergency. In the Zigolo, it can be the entire point. The MG12 is essentially a lightweight motor glider. Its small engine helps you take off and climb. Then, when atmospheric conditions are right, you can reduce the power or shut it down completely. The noise disappears. The vibration disappears. And suddenly the sky becomes your source of energy. Glider pilots search for rising columns of warm air called thermals. Find one, and the aircraft can climb without burning fuel. That completely changes the way you fly. Instead of constantly thinking about throttle and fuel, you begin watching clouds, terrain, sunlight, birds, anything that may reveal where the atmosphere is rising. A short powered climb can become a surprisingly long soaring flight if conditions cooperate. That makes the Zigolo feel more like a sailboat than a normal airplane. A sailboat does not create the wind. It learns how to use it. A glider does the same thing with rising air. This is not the machine for somebody desperate to get somewhere quickly. It is for someone who enjoys the process of staying airborne. But if deliberately shutting off your engine makes you uncomfortable, number 5 offers something designed to make emergencies feel slightly less terrifying. Number 5. Aerolite 103. The Aerolite 103 is one of the aircraft that helped make modern ultralights feel much more approachable. It has the familiar ingredients of a small airplane: high wing, tricycle landing gear, conventional flight controls, a pusher propeller behind the pilot, and a cockpit that feels much more complete than the bare-bones ultralights of earlier decades. But one option attracts more attention than almost anything else. A ballistic recovery parachute. Instead of the pilot leaving the aircraft during a catastrophic emergency, the system is designed to deploy a large parachute capable of lowering the entire aircraft toward the ground. That does not mean you can ignore training, and it definitely does not make the aircraft accident-proof. A parachute needs enough altitude and time to work. But psychologically, it changes things. Engine failure is one of the first fears most new pilots have. Even though a fixed-wing aircraft can glide without engine power, beginners often imagine the airplane simply falling out of the sky. A whole aircraft parachute gives them another layer of protection. And that can make the transition into personal aviation feel much less intimidating. The Aerolite therefore sits in a very interesting middle ground. It is still minimal, still light, still unmistakably an ultralight. But it feels far more substantial than the flying lawn chairs that defined the category decades ago. And if the Aerolite represents practical American ultralight design, number 4 shows what happens when Europeans bring sports car styling into the same world. Number 4. Fly Minifox. The Fly Minifox does not look like what most people imagine when they hear ultralight. It looks like a miniature sport airplane. Sharp nose, compact cockpit, clean surfaces, and a shape that appears much more aerodynamic than the exposed tubing seen on many older ultralights. That clean design is important because lightweight aircraft do not always need more power. Sometimes they need less drag. A car with 25 horsepower would be painfully slow. An airplane can do something useful with surprisingly little power if the airframe is light enough and the aerodynamics are efficient. That is the basic philosophy behind aircraft like the Minifox. Keep the structure light, keep the shape clean, make every horsepower work, and suddenly a tiny engine can deliver a surprisingly satisfying flying experience. The cockpit is also extremely compact. You are not sitting in a big cabin. The airplane almost wraps around your body, and that creates a feeling closer to wearing the aircraft than sitting inside it. Visually, the Minifox represents how much ultralight aviation has changed. Affordable aircraft no longer have to look crude. Lightweight does not have to mean ugly. But no matter how aerodynamic the airplane becomes, those wings still need somewhere to live. Number 3 solves that problem with one of the simplest and most useful ideas on this list. Number 3. Kolb Firefly. The Kolb Firefly has a feature that may save an owner more money than almost any performance improvement ever could. Its wings fold. A single person can bring the wings alongside the fuselage relatively quickly, dramatically reducing the space the aircraft occupies. That matters because the hidden cost of airplane ownership is often the hangar. Depending on where you live, airport storage can cost hundreds of dollars every month. And at busy airports, you may wait a long time just to find available space. The Firefly offers another possibility. Fly the airplane, fold the wings, load it onto a trailer, take it home. This turns aircraft ownership into something much closer to owning a recreational vehicle. Good weather arrives? Take the airplane out. Want to visit a different grass strip? Trailer it there. Need to perform maintenance? The machine can potentially be much closer to home. The Firefly itself follows a very traditional ultralight formula. Simple construction, high wing, lightweight engine, minimal systems, nothing unnecessary. But the folding wing system is what makes the aircraft genuinely practical for the weekend pilot. It does not make the Firefly faster. It makes it easier to actually own. Our number 2 aircraft goes far beyond folding wings. It removes something even more fundamental: the engine. Number 2. Ruppert Archaeopteryx. The Ruppert Archaeopteryx may be the closest thing on this list to actually wearing an airplane. This Swiss-designed sailplane is extremely light and designed around foot-launched flight. There is no normal engine. No traditional powered takeoff. The pilot becomes part of the launch system. Imagine standing on a suitable mountain slope with an enormous wing attached around you. The wind begins loading the structure. You start running. The wing becomes lighter. Your feet move faster. Then, the ground disappears. For a few seconds, human running transforms into flight. Once airborne, the pilot can bring their legs inside the streamlined body and fly the Archaeopteryx much more like a conventional sailplane. From that point on, every decision is about energy. You have altitude. You trade that altitude for distance. Then you search for thermals to climb again. There is no engine to save you if you misjudge the atmosphere. And that makes every decision meaningful. The Archaeopteryx is almost the opposite of modern transportation. No giant battery, no sophisticated propulsion system, no powerful motor, just lightweight materials, a long wing, and the pilot's ability to understand the air. It is perhaps the purest aircraft on this entire list. So why isn't it number 1? Because our final machine can do something the Archaeopteryx, and every other aircraft here, cannot. It can stop in mid-air. Number 1. Mosquito Air. The Mosquito Air looks like somebody took a helicopter, removed the doors, removed the cabin, removed most of the body, and then asked, what else can we take away? What remains is almost entirely mechanical. A seat, an engine, a rotor mast, landing gear, a main rotor, a tail rotor, and one pilot sitting beneath all of it. But do not confuse visual simplicity with mechanical simplicity. The Mosquito may be the most complicated aircraft on this entire list. A conventional ultralight airplane can be remarkably straightforward. The propeller pulls or pushes the machine forward. Air flows over the wings. Control surfaces change direction. A helicopter has a completely different problem. The main rotor must create lift. The rotor also creates torque that tries to spin the fuselage in the opposite direction. The tail rotor must fight that torque, and the pilot has to coordinate several controls at the same time. Learning to hover can feel almost impossible. Your right hand controls the cyclic. Your left hand manages collective. Your feet control the pedals. Change one thing, and something else changes. Add collective. Torque changes. Torque changes. Torque changes. Pedal input changes. The helicopter begins drifting, so the cyclic changes. To a beginner, it can feel like trying to balance on a basketball while using all four limbs independently. But once mastered, the capability is extraordinary. The Mosquito can rise vertically, hover, move sideways, pivot almost in place, and land in areas where no fixed-wing ultralight could possibly operate. That is why it earns the #1 position, not because it is easiest. It isn't. Not because it is the most comfortable. Definitely not. It wins because it delivers genuine helicopter capability. In one of the smallest and most exposed packages imaginable, watching one hover a few feet above the ground almost looks unreal. There is barely any aircraft around the pilot, just machinery, rotor blades, and a person balancing in three-dimensional space. And that may be the perfect ending to this list, because Part 103 has always been about one thing: how little machine do you actually need to fly? These 11 aircraft prove that ultralight aviation is far more diverse than most people realize. You can fly something amphibious, something with folding wings, something controlled by shifting your weight, something that glides silently without an engine, or even a personal helicopter. But one thing should never be forgotten: no pilot certificate does not mean no training. Weather still matters, maintenance still matters, and pilot judgment matters more than almost anything else. Part 103 may reduce some regulatory requirements, but it does not change the laws of physics. So which aircraft would you choose? The amphibious Aventura? The folding Firefly? The silent Archaeopteryx? Or would you be brave enough to fly the Mosquito Air? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy unusual aircraft and personal aviation, subscribe for more machines most people never knew existed.